four-step process. So what is this? So basically, anytime you are doing a free response question on an AP test that asks you to test a claim, test the significance of a claim, basically anytime you're going to have to do a confidence interval or a significance test, this is the process you're going to have to go through. It's called the four-step process because there's four very clear steps in order to get full credit, right? First, you state what hypothesis that you want to test and at what significance level. Or if you're doing a confidence interval, you state that you want to make a confidence interval. And again, at what significance level. Next, plan. You choose the appropriate inference method and you check the conditions for that method. It's also okay to reverse the order of these, right? A lot of times the conditions that are met for your test will determine what method you choose. Now, right now, we only know confidence interval for one proportion or a significance test for one proportion. We will learn more, but each one of those tests or each one of those intervals has its own set of conditions, and we have to make sure they're met before we continue. We learned about the conditions in the last two sections, so I'm not going to rehash them right now. Next, the easy part. Do. If the conditions are met, then you perform the test and the calculations. So this is the actual math part. And lastly, conclude. So you make a decision about the hypothesis, right? If your hypothesis is supported, then you say so. If your hypothesis is rejected, then you say so. It depends on what you're going for. For a confidence interval, if your hypothesis is that it's between two numbers, then you can say that. If your hypothesis is that it's outside of the range, then you can say that. If you're doing a significance test, then remember you're either going to reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis, so you would do that. All right, for an example, we're going to use our friend, the basketball player that we've been referencing in the last video. So, the basketball player says he scores 80% of his free throws. You doubt this, believing he scores less. You convince him to stay behind one day and shoot free throws in front of you while you keep track of how many he makes. Out of 113, he successfully made 87. So those are the numbers that we got from our simulation that we performed the other day, right? Perform a significance test to determine the accuracy of this claim. So this straight up tells us to perform a significance test. It doesn't tell us to use a confidence interval or a significance test, or it doesn't leave it blank. It says specifically use a significance test. So we're going to have to use a significance test. Sometimes it may just say test the accuracy of this claim, in which case we can either do a confidence interval or a significance test. It's up to us. But in this case, we're asked to perform a significance test. So that's what we'll do. So first we need to state what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Well, it says so in the problem. This step is kind of just rehashing what the problem already tells us. All right, so we would like to test the claim that the basketball player scores 80% of his free throws with a significance test at the 95% confidence level. We chose the 95% confidence level because that's the default when it doesn't give you one. In general, if it doesn't give you one, then you use the 95% level, which means our alpha is going to be 0.05. All right, so on top of this, we had to add what our hypotheses were and what the parameters are defined as. So we state the null hypothesis will be that P equals 0.8, or that the proportion of free throws that he makes is 80%. And the alternative hypothesis is that P is less than 0.8, that the proportion of free throws that he makes is less than 80%. So we've stated what it is that we're going to do, we've stated the hypotheses, and we've also included the parameters along with it. So state out of the way. Yes, it is pretty much a restating of what's already in the question, but it's important to do anyway. All right, now the plan. So this is the part where we check the conditions and then say what we're going to do with that information. Okay, so as you see, we have the independent condition met, the random condition is met, the 10% rule is met, and we also have the large counts rule. Therefore, we can go ahead and carry on our significance tests. All right, so now we have to actually do the test, right? Again, remember the name of your class. Remember what it is that you're doing. Like we said before, he made 87. Oops. The null hypothesis is that he made 80%. He made 87 out of 113. And we want to see if there's evidence that he actually makes less than 80% based on our data. according to this, we have a p-value of 0.21196, or we'll just round to 0.212. All right, so when you're doing this step, you want to make sure that you basically record all the relevant information, right? You want to include the actual test statistic, which in this case is the z, and you also want to record the p-value that was associated with it. So, now the last step, we have to draw the conclusion. So based on this p-value, we would fail to reject the null hypothesis, right? So, and there you go. That's the whole thing. Yes, it's a lot. No, you do not have to write it like this. Oftentimes, this will be broken up into several pieces. But this covers everything, so it's at least a good way to think about it. Yeah, anyway, hope this was helpful.